Buckhead is not really much of a town anymore compared to what it was. Of course, some great people live there, and I love it still. But there was, as you cross the railroad track with the Methodist Church ahead of you, on the right was the section foreman's house, and one of my kin people, after during World War II, he lived there, and he didn't work for the railroad; he just rented it because they had kind of changed. But then they had two round brick buildings next to it that had a wooden doors that would open up. Then you had two rails going inside, and that's where they kept the section hands, putt-putt motor cars. And that was always a thrill to see them come along and get off the train take on off, and then they would be given an assignment to do some work on the railroad. So they'd go open doors up. There'd be that putt-putt car in there, so they'd wheel it out to the railroad track, main line. Then they'd pick it up, turn it, put the flanges within the rails, and then they'd crank it up. They go putt-putting up. Well, they finally did away with that back in about, I guess the mid-40s. So the buildings were surplus. So Mr. Crawford, the principal, before he left Buckhead School to become the county school superintendent, he got the railroad to donate him the brick. And so they disassembled it, somebody, and they took it. And as you come across the railroad track from Oconee Shores and Appalachia Woods, and if you, instead of going to the right towards the Baptist Church, to the left, going down Parks Mill Road, if you go straight across, you'll see a brick building over there. Well, that was built to be a nicer school for the African-American population. And it wasn't too many years before they did away with that, of course, and consolidated schools, and everybody then came to Madison. They did away with Buckhead School, and so anyways, people have lived in there, but that's where the brick came from. Buckhead, when I came along, you had 1, 2, 3 stores. You had the big 2-story Davis store. Barbara Bell Tyson, her grandfather was in the business with my grandfather, and he was Charles Davis, and my grandfather was George W. Davis. They had come down from North Carolina, and they bought the store from McWhirters. McWhirters from Greene County built much of Buckhead, and you had Gus McWhirter and Pat McWhirter. And his McWhirter house is still standing. They built the house that I call the Davis House, which is on Davis Lane, and I bought that house and property back in '84. But one of my tenants let fire get loose and burned it down, and I lost that beautiful historic home. But McWhirters built that, and I guess they built the stores. But when I came along, John Jacobs had the store nearest Sylvan Islands Road. It was last known as Bell's Store, and then the Bells closed it down back in the '80s, I guess. And then it became a preschool. Margaret Bell ran a preschool there. And then there was a store adjoining the Davis store that Turner Bell had. And then that day, my mother said that there was a millinery shop, hat shop, next to the Davis' store. And a friend of hers ran it. And she later moved to Atlanta, and she ran a hat shop in Atlanta. And when we'd go to Atlanta, my mother would go and visit her. And then let's see, I don't recall what was on the corner where the little cafe restaurant is right now. Later on, it became a garage right there, and then it became when they built I-20 in the mid-'60s, that was a service station and a little eating area, and a lot of people frequented then. Then next up there was the post office. One thing that really broke everybody's heart too after we lost the depot was the overhead bridge. You go past the post office, up the hill, parallel to the railroad, and there was a wooden bridge that arced over like that. And if the train was blocking the track down at the grade crossing, you could always go up there and cross over. And the Georgia Railroad, and it may have been the CSX by then, but they were carrying tall loads, they had to lower the loads before they left Atlanta or Augusta because they wouldn't normally pass under there. And we don't know whether it was conveniently done by the railroad or accidental. They claim it was accidental. But a huge item, steel or wood, slipped a little bit on one of the cars and it knocked the underpinnings from the bridge out, and the bridge collapsed in the railroad. I was managing the Holiday Inn from 85 to 90 during that time, and the commissioner asked me if I would meet with the lawyers and engineers from the railroad, and we went down to where Gail Wade lives now, and the railroad wanted to put a parallel road along there in case somebody down Appalachian Woods, Oconee Shores need to get to ambulance, need to pick them up or something, and the railroad had it blocked up there at the grade crossing in Buckhead. So we tried to get our representative, Culver Kidd, to impose upon the railroad to rebuild the bridge, but the railroad said, well, the state won't let us build it as it was because it has to be higher. You have to have a longer run up to it so it won't be such a sharp jump over. It has to be 2 lanes so that the cars can meet on the bridge, and this was a 1-lane bridge. I think all that was a smoke screen so they wouldn't have to rebuild the bridge. So that was the end of that. And then the man who lives at the house next to where the bridge was Gordon Brewer. He did the electrical wiring on most of the houses. I guess he had maybe learned it when he was in the CCC in Rutledge up there, but he was an expert electrician. And he wired my grandparents' house, the one that burned. He wired that. They got electricity, I guess, mid to late 30s. I'm not sure exactly. Probably, if I started school in 36, we did have electricity, so probably in 33, 34, somewhere along that, Buckhead got electricity. And down our way, we didn't get it until, ours was rail EMC, we didn't get it till about 39. But Gordon Brewer, the electrician, he was expert at the old Delco generators and batteries, so we always had electric power, but it was 32 volt. It was DC. But we had our house wired down on the river there. We had a house wired, and we had lights in every room. We had outlets, but you couldn't use vacuum cleaners. But you had to buy special motors to use the 32 volt electricity. But out there in our shop, we had a row of glass batteries. I guess each one producing 2 volts, and they were hooked in series and parallel so that you had a lot of reserve capacity. And then we had 2 gasoline-powered generators called Delco plants sitting there. And then when the lights began to dim a little bit, then you go out and you crank one up, charge your batteries up. And we continued that until we got high-line electricity in about 39.